Hello, and welcome to another episode of Drunk Game Retellings. As always, I'm your host, Jack. Well, welcome back, everyone. Here's a new episode for you, featuring a returning guest. We're gonna, along with new people, we're gonna start having some old ones back for what I consider to be the first season of the show. And so, actually, our first returning guest is Steve. You may remember him from the second episode of the show when he talked about the game Okami. This time he's going to be talking about another game of his childhood, one of his favorites. He's talking about the seventh Fire Emblem game, which in America was just called Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance, so that's easy enough to explain. But I'll let Steve take the rest from here, so without further ado, take it away, Steve.
All right. So Fire Emblem 7 or Fire Emblem Rika no Ken or Fire Emblem Binding Blade was the first Fire Emblem game released in outside of Japan and the first one to come to North America. And I remember playing that when it first came out on the Game Boy Advance. And like everyone, I immediately thought that one of the main protagonists, I was like, oh, it's Roy. And no, it's actually Roy's father that just looks exactly like him, because the reason why Fire Emblem got the international release was Roy and Marth were so popular as characters in Smash Brothers Melee. So they were like, well, we're doing the prequel to Fire Emblem 6 about Roy's father. We'll just make him look exactly like Roy and ship that game. But this is actually about Elliewood, sort of. There's 3 main Lord characters in this game. The other one of them actually kind of looks a little bit like Marth, which I think is no accident either. But he's one of the best characters in the game, named Hector. And then there's a character, Lynn, who's sort of like the tutorial. You can play her chapters in the beginning and get some bonus XP on characters before you go on to the next storyline, which is usually Elwood's. If you've beaten the game, you can then play Hector's. But starting out, you start out as the Avatar, which is the first game to give you an Avatar player character. You get to choose your name and birthday, and they give you a little emblem to go along with it. And the first 10 chapters with Lynn are sort of this prologue of, like, here are the instructions, here's how you play the game. But it starts out with you waking up in the plains of the country of no, names are not going to get pronounced in this reading. I'm so sorry. But basically the Native American tribe of this continent and this world. And Lynn takes you in and she like asks you for your name and, starts the generic RPG of that sense of the lost traveler. But soon you and her get embroiled in a plot with the local ruling monarch. It turns out Lynn is his long-lost granddaughter, and she's heir to the fortune. So naturally, there are people that want to stop Lynn from reaching her grandfather and sort of claiming her birthright. And so as you travel, you meet several people, allies, from this monarchy that are sent out to find you / help you, or people Lynn maybe knows from her past. There is a side chapter that you can get that sort of delves into this occult group called the Black Fang, and you hear a little bit about them on your quest, but there's not a lot mentioned, and they sort of pop up later in the storyline. And so as you travel through these chapters, you gain allies, different units of different classes to help you along your way. And this is, again, very much a tutorial. They teach you how, the battle system works. Certain things like ballisticians, which are like giant crossbow, longbow weapons, the weapons triangle, how to unlock doors, how thieves work, how mages work and healing works. And it's just sort of an intro level of learn Fire Emblem, because again, this is the first Fire Emblem game that most people outside of Japan are playing. But in the end, Lynn, reunites with her grandfather, and they make up, and it's very sweet and wonderful. And a lot of people do not like this chapter. This section. They feel like it's very hand-holdy, and admittedly, on normal and easy mode, they do walk you through a lot of it. And so if you've already played it before, it can be very annoying. But it does allow some certain units that you'll get back later to reach a higher level. Plus, you can get extra money from doing it. After Lynn's mode ends, you have the choice. If you've not already beaten the game, you have to do Elliewood's mode. If not, you can do Hector's mode. And I like buying this game used or getting a VBA of it that has it with Hector's mode unlocked, because Hector's a fucking badass and Elliewood's a little whiny boy with completely average stats, while Hector's just an unkillable god. So playing Hector's mode is a lot more fun. It also is a little bit harder, and you get some extra chapters out of it, which is nice, and I think it adds to the story. But they essentially play as very similar games. Basically, Elliewood's looking for his father, and there's uprising in his region. Again, they don't use kingdoms; they use like marquise and interesting titles such as that. I don't know where that falls on the feudal system. But basically, you get embroiled in a plot of trying to find Elliewood's father. And as far as Hector's storyline goes, it follows a very similar sort of thing. I'll tell you where they sort of diverge. But basically, you find out some of the other marquises in this kingdom. It's not like a kingdom in the normal sense of like there's the highest person up there, but it's more like a council that rule together. So obviously, think Game of Thrones council is going to be corrupt. But, you know, in your quest to find your father, you find out more about this Black Fang and how they're trying to bring back the dragons to essentially use as weapons. And you sort of travel the world collecting more units for your army, but also learning more. And you find out more about these dragons and how they're coming back to kill you. And I will admit this is a very... It's not, you know, the most world-renowned story, but compared to some of the more recent Fire Emblem games, it's a cohesive story. And that's a huge, hugely wonderful thing to have. And I miss that for certain. But you go to the Spooky Yuki Island, and you find your dad, and he's basically like, hey, this evil dude's trying to bring back dragons, run away. And I believe your dad dies, and you're like, oh, balls, but... You know, you got to find, you know, you're like, well, we got to stop the dragons. And to do that, we need to collect these ancient weapons from the heroes that vanquished the dragons many, many years ago. And this is also where it starts relating to the 6th game, which is the sequel, or which that game is a prequel to. Because you go to this country where basically this guy the king there can't keep it in his pants because he's got 2 kids. One of them's illegitimate and the other one's legitimate. An older son illegitimate and the daughter's legitimate. And basically he's like, I'm going to kill off the son and, you know, hire assassins to do it. The Black Fang, the people trying to raise the dragons, I'm going to like hire them to kill off my son, or because I don't like him anymore. And you save him, and that son 20 years down the line is the evil guy that causes all the problems and is the major villain for the game with Roy in it. So, you know, by inadvertently saving this guy, you cause all of the problems and the death of many of the characters in this game, actually. But you ultimately go to this kingdom, save a guy that's going to later become a murderer, and you get the Fire Emblem, which is used to, I believe, unlock the weapons. In this game, it changes from game to game what the Fire Emblem does, to be honest. That being said, you then go to unlock all of the weapons. I believe you get help from one of the original heroes that killed the dragons many, many years ago, or defeated the dragons, who's still alive somehow, but he's a wizard, so I guess we're going to go let it slide. Yeah, so you get help from that, and along the way, you're fighting the Black Fang. The main villains are these things called morphs that are essentially creatures that are created similar to like a really advanced golem. They're not human. They're made of like energy so much, and they take human form. And the bad guy has like 3 of them running around doing stuff. So you gotta handle that. There's some really good storylines involving a lot of the side characters, to be perfectly honest. The main heroes, their storyline can be a little generic, but there's actually a really good one. the Black Fang was originally just a normal mercenary group, and they weren't like totally bad. But the main bad guy Nurgle inserts a morph into the group as the wife of the main villain, and he, basically she can, controls his mind and therefore controls the group. And so there's a lot of like discontent among the main followers, two of them being the sons of the leader and brothers, and you end up fighting them along the way, and their conversations with you and about like what they're doing are actually pretty well written, and their reactions to, one of them dying is very well done in my opinion. There's also a character that you pick up called Ninio, and she's this like mage you get her late game, and her storyline, she thinks Sonya's her mom, and Sonya's one of the main morphs, and her realization of her not being, her mother and not caring about her is really, in my opinion, really well done. Actually, a lot of the main elements of why people like these games and these stories is you can build supports between characters and find out backstories and find out a lot more information about these characters. They're not just, oh, here's this unit. And then honestly, a lot of the times you pick your units of what you use because you like certain ones more. Not necessarily they're always better. You get a lot of units that are duplicates of the same class, and they might have slightly different stats and, growths on those stats. And so, you could pick based on that, but a lot of times you pick your favorite knight or your favorite cavalier or your favorite archer based on how they support and their conversations they have. And so that really makes the game interesting. But, so you find your sacred weapons, your magic MacGuffins, if you will, these overpowered weapons that you never want to use because they only have 10 uses, and weapon degradation is a thing in this game. So, you don't want to use all of them up before they're gone. But, you get your weapons, you defeat the Black Fang, which is tragic because they're being used, and you go to fight the final boss in his dragon form. And a lot of people forget about the final boss, which people don't realize is they've got a lot of status ailment spells, and you don't encounter a lot of them, so you usually don't think to bring those types of weapon, like the staves to give you recover and like restore and heal those status ailments. You don't always bring those, and then you can get totally ruined by them, which is really frustrating. And that's sort of Eliwood's storyline. Hector's storyline isn't much different. You do find out a little bit more backstory on the main villain, Nurgle. And basically what you find out is that to save his kids, which are units you get in this game, he had to take on the dark power to sort of be able to save them, and that corrupted him and turned him evil. And so you sort of learn about that and why he is, and so it gives him a little more tragic element. I think the main draw for this game and why so many people found it fun was, the story is good. It's relatively cohesive. There's not a huge gaping holes in the plot or character motivation, but a lot of it comes from the character interactions with each other and the supports you can build, and then also there's a satisfaction of successfully completing the level. Each one has sort of a puzzle element to it of like what strategy are you going to use to beat it. And, when you start really get, your steam going, and you get your character starting to level up and get really powerful, there's a satisfaction to that, and a real triggers a sensory in your brain that makes you feel good for doing so well. And I think that element to this game is sort of fun, and watching your army grow from these, pitiful kind of weak units to just powerhouses it's really nice. And so, this game came out and it was very successful, and they made sequels and sort of become the franchise that, has waxed and waned in popularity over time, but it's definitely different than where it was here. And this game is very personal to me because this is one of the first, I played this when I was 8. And I've been with it ever since, so it means a lot. But it's a fun sort of fantasy adventure game. Again, the characters can really endear themselves to you, or they can just piss you off. And if they piss you off, you don't, just bench them. Don't bring them into battle. You don't have to use certain characters if you don't want to. And this is, again, it also serves as the prequel to the sequel game. And admittedly, you don't have to have played 6 to understand this, and they certainly did that with an intention because 6 is not available legally for Western players. but it certainly carries itself as its own story, which is pleasant to hear for sure.
And welcome back to our discussion session of that Fire Emblem game that Steve was just talking about. And here he is actually right with me, my good old friend Steve, returning again to the show. Welcome back, Steve.
It's good to be back. I felt I didn't do the storyline of Okami justice. I felt like I rambled a little too much, and then I come into this and I'm just like, oh, these names I'm not even going to try, so maybe third time will be a charm.
Yeah, I felt like now is about time to actually bring back old guests, so it was great to have you back on. Normally I get started with talking about the games, but something I always feel like I neglect. I just want to ask you, what drink did you have before you got started?
I'm actually drinking a little bit of Fireball. My friend Kim got me this for my birthday, so I'm decided to crack into it finally and just have some of that. I don't have any mixer, but I can just drink it straight. So I've got this in a cup of water.
I feel like Fireball is one of those drinks where you either really like it or really hate it. Are you on the really like it crowd, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I'm on the really like it crowd. It's no longer my go-to. My old roommate and I would say, like, when we went out, that was like the one, like, let's do a shot before we go out, or let's, I think a lot of my friends don't, drink as much now that we're not in college, but this is the one thing that will get them like, oh, let's do that, like, as far as hard liquor goes. I also really like cinnamon, so I'm perfectly okay with this drink.
Yeah, I feel I'm like one of the few people that has like mixed feelings on the drink, whereas there are moments where I will really enjoy a Fireball shot. For real. Because it's like, it tastes kind of like a Red Hot. Like, I love Red Hots.
It's an easy shot to do, and there's not a lot of drinks out there that are easy shots to do.
Yeah, although I would say one of my favorite shots to do is what is known as a buttery nipple.
Yeah.
Sounds
eerily familiar.
Yeah, anyone listening in right now, if just Google that, you'll know what a buttery nipple is. I promise you.
Safe search on, please.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, or just do drink buttery nipple.
Yeah,
drink.
buttery nipple drink. Like, what even would that be though? It would just be like a nipple with like a.
I'm assuming maybe they'll assume that's what it is.
Like what? Yeah, because it's
Google will be like, because I know Google. If you search on Google, they won't like show you porn unless you specifically say like porn. And part of that reason I know that too is my mom does a lot of anatomy stuff for the classes she teaches. So when she has to like Google image anatomy parts, Google is very good about giving her but she also I think turns safe search on, so she gets the scientific diagrams and information.
Yeah, because it's like, I can't imagine there's a fetish out there of just, like, pictures of nipples covered in, like, would it be a melted butter or just, like, a stick of butter?
I think it's, like chapstick, you use it like a chapstick. You just sort of
I feel like that'd be it. I imagine, though, that, like, someone in the comments would be upset, be like, yo, listen, I know that's margarine, you fucker.
I know, right? That's not butter.
That's not actually
bitch.
Butter. It's like, I don't pull that. Well, I can't believe it's not butter. Not here.
Yeah, not now.
I can't get off of it unless it's butter. Okay, but with that though, let's get back to the of course related topic
of the video game. Yeah,
Fire Emblem, which translates to buttered nipple.
Yeah, buttered nipple. The game is.
You were kind of alluding to it, how Fire Emblem as a series has sort of like been a part of your childhood.
Yeah.
Can you was this your first Fire Emblem game?
It was. I mean, this was the first one out in the States. I certainly at 8 in 2003 didn't have access to like, ROM hacks, or I didn't get like a bootleg copy of it from Japan for like the SNES or anything. There wasn't one for the N64, and I didn't own a Nintendo. So I did have a Super Nintendo for a brief period of time, but yeah, so I could have in theory tried to get some of the games, but like, I don't know. I don't think the access to them would have been that easy.
So did you not experience Roy and Martha on Smash Brothers first?
I did. I didn't know where they were from until my friend told me, and I had no idea what the series was. And then I was at summer camp like a day camp because my parents worked during the summer, and one of my friends who was there, he had it for the Game Boy Advance, and I remember me and this other guy, we were all three of us friends, and we were obsessed with that game, and we were like, oh, that's is that Roy? And he was like, no, that's Elliewood, it's Roy's dad, and or actually, I don't think we knew it was Roy's dad at that point because you didn't know the relationship until the end, where he's like, this is like if you'd played 6, you would know Elliewood's Roy's dad. But if you only played 7, you wouldn't know till when he's like, hey, there's this ending scene with him and Hector where they're like introducing their kids, and it's like Roy and this other person from Fire Emblem 6. So you're like, oh, that's the relationship. But like we were like, is that Roy? Because red-haired sword dude looks like Roy, and he's like, no, it's Elliewood. And I'm like, oh, they just look almost identical. And then Hector looks, a little like blue hair, cut similar to Marth. If you look at the profiles, like there's no way you could mistake them if you like have seen the two characters. But like, it's just like it's not a coincidence that these two main lords like look like these characters. Obviously, how Elliewood's the dad, like Roy's dad, so of course they're going to look similar. But like, it's not a coincidence that this game got made with this in mind.
Yeah, I can understand that. So you played it on the Game Boy Advance first. That's correct. Not
Yes.
On the ROM.
No, yeah, the first time I ever played it was on the Game Boy Advance. I've beaten both story mode, well, all three. I guess Lynn's mode really doesn't count, but I've beaten Hector and Elliewood's mode on the Game Boy Advance and on the ROM.
So is Lynn the girl that was in Brawl?
She is. She's the assist trophy in Brawl that crits a lot. Yeah, and I didn't mind her story, like her story mode. I can see that it's very tutorially if you don't play it on the higher levels. So if you already know how to play Fire Emblem, it is kind of frustrating, and a lot of people feel she's kind of a forced main character. I personally didn't mind her so much, and I felt like she had enough distinctive personality that made her interesting. But I could see the frustration.
So how many Fire Emblem games have you played? Just to
Let's
ask.
see. There's 14 out. If you count Fate's Revelation, Birthright, Conquest, all is the same. So Fates. If you count Fates as one game, there's 14.
Mm-hmm.
I have played 12 or 11 of them.
Ooh.
There's 2 remakes. There's 2 remakes that are out, and I've only played one of the remakes.
Now, was this game that you played, was it ever remade? Or
No, I'm actually waiting on them to do it. I feel like now that they've reintroduced with Awakening and Fates the child system, I think it's really primed to do a remake. Like even if it's just like sort of an HD remake of these games where, start with 7, let us play through 7, and then there's a lot of kids of 7's characters that are in 6. And I think you could do that and, let the stats and the skills and all that carry over. And I think it could be a really interesting game. And the game's sort of already made for you, so you don't really have to do anything that much different. Just like update the graphics. That makes me nervous, though, because I know that we've had some mutual friends that have also complained about this, but they changed some of the visual designs in the more recent games, and it's not necessarily for the better, because you got, like, dragon knights, these fierce warriors that fly on dragons, and one of them, literally, I remember in Awakening, is wearing assless chaps and underwear. Like, that's what her pants are, and I'm just like, why? There's a fighter in Fates, the first female fighter in the entire series, and she literally is wearing like metal underwear as armor, and it just doesn't make sense.
Well, you just gotta be comfortable. That's
yeah, clearly,
it's very comfortable to sit on the scales of a dragon with assless chaps.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you're flying up in the sky on this dragon, but like who needs pants?
Yeah, just feel the breeze. That's the warrior's way.
I know, right? And everyone's got the same cup size, whether you're like 12 or 28. Typical anime on that one for sure.
Yeah. So you were kind of talking about the story a lot, but Can you kind of talk about a little bit about what about Fire Emblem has kind of kept you coming back? I know this specific game is a
Yeah.
part of your childhood, but what do you think is it about Fire Emblem that has
I
kind of
think
gotten you attached?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit, but it's sort of the puzzle element of the game. I mean, if you don't know, Fire Emblem is sort of this. It's a grid board of like a map, and you have a certain amount of units. You have an objective: defend, kill a boss, survive a certain amount of turns. Like it varies on chapter to chapter, and that does keep things interesting. But each one's sort of a puzzle. Is how do you send your units out? How do you want to play the map? And also a big portion of playing the map is who's fighting the battles, who's killing units. Fighting battles gives you XP, but killing units gives you more XP. And in especially this Fire Emblem game, it's not an open world, meaning you can't play encounters over and over and over. You can't grind for XP. There's only a certain amount of XP you can get in the entire game, so you kind of have to pick units you want to stick with and level those units up.
Oh,
Yeah, something they do, and I think it's a very nice feature, is they give you a unit in pretty much every Fire Emblem game. The term for them is Jagen, because in the first Fire Emblem game, you get a unit called Jagen. He's a paladin, so he's a pre-promote. Units range from levels 1 to 20. If units are a tier 1 unit, when they get to level 20, they max out. At level 10 through 20, at any point, you can give them an item to promote them to the next class. And then there's 20 more levels they can gain. And so there's benefits to promoting early. There's benefits to waiting until they're maxed out level 20. But these pre-promotes, when you get them, can kill any unit. They don't take damage. They pretty much dodge every attack. But ultimately, they're usually a waste of experience. Because later on in the game, they're not going to do as much for you. And all that XP that was wasted on them, because they don't get as much because they're promoted and they're so high level, is XP that could have gone to other units.
okay.
So yeah, there's a skill in that of like resource management with your items, with your XP, but also like how do you defeat the level? Like how do you progress through the level in order to complete the objective? And there's a satisfaction in getting it right, I guess I should say.
So you're really a fan of like all of the strategic elements in these games.
Yeah. I enjoy it, for sure. And it's definitely gotten a lot more strategic in the sense of I feel like how you play your units. Like in this Fire Emblem game, it's kind of like you pick a unit you like that fills the role you need, and you hope that when they level up, they get good level ups. And now there's a whole system of like reclassing into different units and getting different skills. And there's something I like about that, but there's a nice sort of simplicity to this Fire Emblem that keeps drawing me back. It doesn't make me have to think too much, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, I've only played one Fire Emblem game, and that's Awakening, which I know is the one that kind of started the trend of the embrace the booby kind of.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
Design. Like, one thing I remember from that game is that it tries to focus a lot about marriage in the game. When you pair up people, like have these communications, if they typically get married. Is that also in your?
Yes and no. So there's a big thing in Fire Emblem Awakening is like because the kids are tracked through the females, pretty much every female can pair with any of the males.
No exceptions.
Yeah, I don't think there's many exceptions with that. If they can have kids, they can pair with I think any male. I think the only exception is Cordelia can't pair with Chrom because that's her whole storyline of like she doesn't feel like her and Chrom should be together. Mm-hmm. In this game, you have a certain amount of you can't actually make as many supports as you can. Like in Awakening, you can make as many A rank supports and only one S rank. With your wife or husband, depending on who you are. Mm-hmm. In Fire Emblem Awakening, you get 5 points, which means if you go to A rank, which is the highest, you can then do a B rank with another person or a C rank with 2 other people. Or you can do like a B rank and 3 C ranks. So like you have a limit to that. But certain characters, if you pair them up, will get an ending together. And the nice thing about this sort of restriction, I will say, is in Awakening, a lot of the storylines are very, like, they're the same conversation. Like, maybe a name swapped out, especially with the kids and their parents. and some of the like other relationships, it's not, they're not entirely well, but they have some really nice storylines and backstories that you get with these relationships. And there are certain characters that I am like, I'm gonna pair you guys up and get you guys married because I think your relationship's adorable and I want to see the two of you together.
Now, one other thing I remembered, which I highly doubt is in this is the sixth one. Is that correct?
This is the seventh one.
Oh, it's the seventh one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I remembered is that sometimes when you had kids, their children would come from the future.
There are no kids in this one. The kids only appear in the next game, and they're sort of tangentially related or sort of like retconned in as the kids of these characters.
Because I know one of them is the dad of Roy.
Yeah, like Elwood, Roy and Lilina, who are the kids of Eliwood and Hector, get introduced at the end. And there's a reference to some of the characters have kids that are like, that they are like, oh, by the way, this, like in their endings, like there's an archer and it mentions that she has a kid that's an archer that is partners with Roy, and that's the archer you get in the beginning of Fire Emblem 6 with Roy. And like you wouldn't know that unless they told you that she was going to be his mom. So that's what I'm saying is something you could do like that in, if you did a remake of this, you could have it where you play through 7 and the one character's name is Rebecca, and whoever you pair Rebecca up, her son Walt, who's in 6, when you get him, he'll have the attributes of his dad, or he'll get the attributes of his dad based on who you paired her up with. And like Roy would get the attributes of whoever you paired Eliwood up with, and same with Lilina, and Sue would have the same sort of effect. And who else is the kid of someone? I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but like, all these people would have that effect.
It'd be funny if they like remade this and had like amiibo support, and then if they did kind of that idea you did, where like the second game being like carrying over, like you go, okay, yeah. I want Eliwood to be with Lucina, so Roy will now have blue hair.
They might. I mean, they probably would especially if they'd probably do it for the next or whatever, and if the next has some more. I don't know. I've been waiting for this for a while. They introduced the concept of marriage and children actually in the 4th game, and they did it a lot more cohesive storyline wise than Awakening was. Like Awakening was okay, but like it only worked for Awakening. Like you can't, like Fates just didn't understand that you can't really do that same sort of thing again.
Yeah.
But Fates has a lot of problems that are just beyond that. So.
No, I could see that. I just like, I still just think the idea of like, really with Fates when they were trying to include amiibos within like that game to have like characters in there. Would you mind if they were to do a remake of? I should first ask, like, if they were to do a remake of Final Fantasy. I said Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, a remake of Final Fantasy VII. That's already coming out. But if they were doing a remake of Fire Emblem 7, what sort of things would you be looking for? You kind of alluded to some of them, but
it would be nice to be able to play Hector's mode straight off the bat. I think if you're doing it where their games are connected, like you're connecting 6 and 7, so it's one long game, I think being able to play Hector's mode immediately is almost a must, because it would be annoying to have to play all the way through LA Woods and then be like, well, I guess I could go back and play Hector's mode, but I should be continuing on to the next game. 6. Other than that, there's not a huge amount of flaws. Like the major thing I can think of as far as game breaking is axes aren't amazing, but they're not as bad as they have been in previous games. Like there's this whole weapon triangle where if you use axes against swords, sword users will have the advantages. If you use axes against lances, axe users will have the advantage. And then with sword users, they have the advantage against axes, but the disadvantage against lances. And within that weapon triangle, it feels like axes are always getting the shafted end of that. But it was a lot worse in Fire Emblem 6. I would say the other thing would have to be fixing, there's a Dark Tome Luna that removes resistance. Resistance is the stat that is magic resistance. And it's completely busted. But if you remove that aspect, you're one dark magic user that can use this tome or the spell is completely useless. So you kind of, in order to make him useful, need to keep it in. And he's my favorite character, so I kind of don't want him to like be useless.
Uh-huh.
Uh, let's see, what's the other thing that was? Oh, just a little bit more enemy diversity. There's a lot of axe users in this game, so your lance users kind of have trouble leveling up sometimes. It feels like if you play Elliewood in Lynn's mode, if you play Hector's mode, it's a little more balanced. But if you play Lynn, and that's how I felt about it at least. But honestly, I think the game is relatively good. I think you're given a decent enough amount of characters. I wish you could build supports with everyone just to get all the support dialogues and not have to play through it multiple times with supports you don't intend on keeping, because supports give bonuses. That's why it's not like that, because otherwise you'd have insane bonuses with so many people.
Yeah.
And that kind of would break the system a little bit. But it's also like there are certain supports that I just like, I don't want to get them because they're with characters I don't want to use. Like I don't want them to take up spots in my army when I'm going to a battle, because you only get a certain amount of units you can take with you per level. And you know, there's maybe units I don't want to have to take with me. So it'd be nice to do that. But again, it's something that like if it didn't fix, you know, it like if they fixed it, it would only cause more problems. So I don't know what I'd actually have them really fix.
I was just wondering, this game is on the Wii U, right now, like on its virtual console?
I know it was part of the ambassador program with the 3DS. But I think they finally did put it on the virtual console. I think they did. I think they finally did, actually, now that I think about it, yes.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, it'd be kind of a bummer when it's just, like, at the end of this, it's like, so, where can I play this? And you just go, nowhere! Get it wrong!
It used to be nowhere. No, it really did. But I think they finally did add it on to the virtual store, which is nice. You know, it was part, again, if you got the early 3DS before the price drop, you would have had it from there, but...
Yeah. I feel like it's thanks to, like, kind of Fire Emblem's sort of resurgence that we're seeing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean... I think Radiant Dawn was a really, or Path of Radiance was a good Fire Emblem game. There were problems with it, but it was good. And then, while Radiant Dawn was super fun, the way that they did the storyline made it a lot harder to really enjoy the game and play the game properly. I want to point to Awkward Zombie, that comic, because all of their Fire Emblem comics are spot on accurate. Like anyone that's played the series is like, yep, I agree with what you're saying, Kieran. I know what you're saying. Because the way you sort of build your armies, you take the weakest units you can find, and usually those units will end up being incredible powerhouses. And so you want to take that time to level it up, but you end up switching factions and units so frequently in Fire Emblem during different parts of the story that you don't really get to stick. Or Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, you don't get to stick with enough units to really level them up. So you get to a point where you have basically two sets of units, the units from Path of Radiance and the new units, and they're like, which ones do you want to use? And you're like, well, I'm going to use the units from Radiant Dawn because the other ones are just kind of worthless. Like, they're not, like, I didn't get a chance to level them up far enough, so it's not going to happen. You know, in a game with permadeath, where if a unit dies, they're dead, you know, you kind of don't want to risk it. And then after Path of Radiant Dawn, it was the remake of the first Fire Emblem game, and the graphics were ugly, and the gameplay wasn't very fun, and no one really wanted to play it. So they did a remake of the third Fire Emblem game, which was a sequel to the first one, and only released it in Japan. And the series was sort of dwindling, and they didn't know if it was going to continue. Awakening came out and really reinvested a lot of people. And I think Fire Emblem does its best when it's a portable game, because it's a slow-paced, sort of methodical game. It's something you can take your time with when you're like traveling or doing stuff, and you don't need to have like quick reflexes to do everything. So you can like put it down, go do something, and come back, you know, which is nice. And Awakening sort of brought that back in a way that people could, you know, the game was certainly relatable and playable. And because it was open world, it meant that if, you know, you were struggling, you could level grind and really, you know, level up your units.
Yeah. As far as, like, that was the only game I played, really, the series. Would you recommend, like, Seven Final Fantasy. I keep saying Final Fantasy Seven.
No, I mean, it's FE and FF. Like,
It's
it's
those.
the
It's the
same.
F. It's just like damn. It's
Yeah,
like
no,
it's
they're
like
both about spiky colored anime haired people, so
except this one's with red hair, and the other one's with blonde hair. But
pretty
with
much.
Fire Emblem 7, which wasn't it just Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance in America?
It was because it was the first one, so they didn't need a subtitle.
That's all to say.
Yeah.
So, if I wanted to try out like another Fire Emblem game, like after having gone through, say Awakening, or maybe if I've never played one, would you recommend going straight to just that one, or?
I think if you really enjoyed Awakening and you were like, I want a good, like, what I've been saying sounds good to you and you want that more traditional Fire Emblem game, yes. If you're still a little bit unsure but you want to play another Fire Emblem game and you don't really want to play Fates, I would say go to Fire Emblem 8, which is not the sequel to this one, but it's the next one that came out for the Game Boy Advance in America.
Yeah.
And that one has a more similar, like, it has the open world map, it has the branching promotions, that's more similar to Awakening. And I would say play that one. And if you liked what that did, play Fire Emblem 7.
No, what was Fire Emblem 8 called in America? Was it like a Final
That
Fantasy?
was Sacred Stones, and it had the twins in it.
Because I would find it really funny if they just pulled a Final Fantasy and went, oh, that's 2.
Fire Emblem 2. Yeah.
This is 3.
Fire Emblem the second one.
Fire Emblem the second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Fire Emblem 2 Towers.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, localization can be pretty funny sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And again, the localization on these are pretty good. And the other ones, and like the Game Boy Advance ones, there's not anything super crazy going on with them. They didn't really have to edit a lot out or anything. It was a pretty smooth translation over.
Well, that's good. It's always, there's always that little issue of like, oh no, is there like a weird little...
Yeah.
Because I been reading a book lately. You've seen it before.
Yes, I have. I've seen it on your coffee table.
We have Legends of Localization of Zelda, and which I highly recommend because it's a nice to viewers and to, of course, you. Just because it's a nice little overview of kind of like the differences between the Japanese and English version at a very in detail level. I'd love to see one of just Fire Emblem. Like maybe I feel like the 7 one would be a great example considering like that was the first one.
Yeah, and again, it was sort of made to capitalize on the West's lack of knowledge of the Fire Emblem series. Like again, like the characters are very much the main 2 male lords are very much designed after the characters in Melee. Obviously, one of them being the character's father. But that being said, it's still like it panders to that, and it's expecting these. It needs to work with that because the West has really no other knowledge beyond maybe if you got a, game from overseas, but a very niche group are going to know what this game is and what this is about. So I think that's why the inclusion of Lynn's story mode is so important, is that this is going to be a new series for the West. And I don't know if Famicom Wars and like Advance Wars had come out in the West yet. I think that didn't come out till later. But yeah, you kind of needed that tutorial, I felt like. I mean, 8-year-old Steve certainly needed it.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, is the Fire Emblem's, like, timeline, like, is it actually, like, laid out, like, in a clear
No,
way?
it wasn't until Awakening decided to mess everything up. Like, okay, so Awakening was like, oh, we're gonna, like, okay, so Fire Emblem 6 and 7, obviously related. They're the prequel sequel.
Uh-huh.
Radiant Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn are same universe. Fire Emblem 1 and 3 and the subsequent remakes, those are related. I think Fire Emblem 2 is also related to but it's like a side story. But it's like, again, it's like, it's a very cohesive sort of like thing. It was Awakening decided it wanted to be like the spiritual successor to the Marth series, and that's fine. And they threw in a quick reference to Ike, which I don't take as much than just sort of like, oh, look, Ike's ancestor is in this game, ha ha ha. But like, I would take it as that. I would say no, they're not related. They're all sort of in their own separate thing.
Oh, so there's not going to be like a big like Fire Emblem book that people are claiming for. Like, where's the timeline?
Yeah, no, it's not going to be like Legend of Zelda. I don't think so. I don't think anyone wants that, to be perfectly honest. Anyway,
What is there? Since you've played most of them, if they ever tried that, would there also be kind of like a branching timeline thing? Like,
I think there would have to be or overlap because it all takes place in a very like it's all medieval up until really I would say probably Awakening. Not so much Awakening. I think Fates is probably one of the more modern ones of it. But like they're all like they all take place in similar. Like everyone's using swords and lances and bows and axes. So it's not like one of them are different. Like it'd be like saying, oh no, one of them's in like there was three different medieval periods. Like like you think feudal like medieval Europe, like that happened at one point in the world, and then like 500 years later it was happening again on the other side of the world. Like that wouldn't necessarily make sense. So
everyone's just kind of waiting for the gun to be invented.
Yeah,
I'm just imagining that's going to be like the final boss of the next one.
God, it's just someone wielding a gun. I mean, they're getting there. Believe me, they're getting there to the point that eventually someone's going to start using guns.
Someone's going to get guns, and then all of a sudden the series will suddenly shift. The next one will be Fire Emblem, and then subtitle will be Advance Wars.
I mean, I think that's what it will just be. Advance Wars, that series is sort of dead, so maybe they're just waiting to transition back into Advance Wars.
I mean, to be fair, that series did kind of die after it did, like, its, like, gritty, modern, like...
Really?
Which is funny, because it was already sort of, like, it was in the modern, but it's like they made it more... So I'm just waiting for that. They'll have one where instead of swords, it'll be knives, and it'll be, like... and they'll have all guns, like, so this is the Fire Emblem of the modern age. Although I feel like that era in games has sort of died down. Like, at least I feel like it is. Like there's a less incentive to be edgy and modern.
Yeah.
Because like if you look at something like Call of Duty, they're in space now. That's not.
Oh yeah.
And then Battlefield's in World War I, so everyone's.
I don't think Fire Emblem would work in a modern setting, just the way that the class diversity and units work, and how like you're supposed to play attacking and defending. But that being said, I definitely feel like they are being there's a pressure to come up with more storylines because they are sort of locking themselves into the same, dragons fantasy setting, and that's sort of what Awakening and Awakening and Fates was trying to do,
I will,
and
yeah. I will say, even though it's barely Fire Emblem related, other than really just character mentions.
The Fire Emblem
the Shin Megami Tensei Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
No, tell me about that one. That sounds like a really fresh take on the franchise. That honestly, this is sort of a stagnant franchise, you could say.
I mean, it's interesting because it is much more of a Persona game than either one of those two. But how it relates to Fire Emblem is that essentially they each have kind of like these teenagers. Well, really not really teenagers. They're like 18, 19.
Yeah, okay. Young adults.
Like they're young adults. They're almost at that point where they're all essentially at this like idol like entertainment and like company that are all. It's like a front where it's like they're all doing like this girl's an idol, this girl's an actress. This guy's trying to be like a Kamen Rider, like Power Rangers guy on like a stage show, and it's like, but they're only doing this to power up like their kind of spirit, like they're called mirages. It's kind of like a Persona, or like if you ever seen JoJo, like their stand, and they're based around a Fire Emblem character from all eras. I believe one of them is from.
I'm sure. There's gotta be.
There might be one that's from 7. A lot of them are from Awakening, like the main.
Yeah.
Just because.
No, I mean that's understandable. It's it's one of the more recent ones. It's certainly one.
Because like this game was in development before Fates was even out, so it's like that's understandable. Like the main character has like Chrom, and they all from what the director said, like it was basically designed so that these were like, what if Fire Emblem characters like their world was just constantly at war forever. Like, how would these people sort of evolve in their world? as time went on, they all kind of look like kind of soulless, immortal, like beings of sort. Well, I don't, like I said, I haven't finished the game yet, but that's kind of like director kind of explained like their design choice, which I find that kind of interesting. Like imagining like Fire Emblem like as their world like constantly at war forever. Like there's always going to be a conflict no matter what. There's never going to be a much of a peace for too long.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad, but it's like it's kind of neat. I guess if so, like I said, like I don't consider it much like a Fire Emblem game, so I can't really say, oh, here's the modern Fire Emblem, but it's like it's almost at that point. So I feel like there could be a way for you to do a Fire Emblem where it wouldn't just be like, oh, here's our gun.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you could have like spirit people like do swords or something like that. You could, I mean, anime does it all the time. Like there's I feel like there's definitely ways you can pull that off. It'll just, you just have to be a little creative about that. But that's my brief little take on Tokyo Mirage Sessions. It's a cool game. It is a Wii U exclusive because, of course, it's a Nintendo property involved. So you're never going to see that on Xbox. That's just how things are. I'm sure the Wii U will go down in price in a couple of years anyway. So when it eventually does, try to find that game will at least be available digitally. Because I feel like that game was just made to be like out of stock by the end of the year. There's some games out there that just are designed to be like, yeah, we're gonna be gone soon, so
yeah, get it while you can, otherwise it's gone.
Yeah, it's like, is there any Fire Emblem that's like that? Where, not excluding these little spin-offs, but it's like, has there ever been like a Fire Emblem game where it's just
no, I think all of them have been pretty well, like, wide releases. Again, like, they've been released worldwide pretty regularly. Except for the remake of the third one, but everything else has been, Fates has been pretty accessible. Awakening was, like, as time has passed, certainly no, like, it'd be hard to find some of them now, but when they were coming out, I think it's pretty, they're like, they want everyone to make sure they can get their hold. I think because of the niche appeal of Mirage Sessions, I think that's why there's so limited availability.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like, I know for sure since it's like a crossover with Shin Megami Tensei itself, which is not like the hugest franchise anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the game might have had a better audience if they just called it like Fire Emblem Persona.
Probably, to be honest.
You'd have seen that crowd going like, oh crap, I need a Wii U stat!
Yeah, they would have been like, all the people with the PS4s and the PS3s, the PSVs would have been like, well, shoot, there's a new Persona game. Like, I'll get a Wii U for that.
I mean, people bought a fucking PS Vita just for a Persona 4 re-release with with extra stuff, and then Persona 4 dancing all night. Although the 3DS did get its own as well, but it's like, I just find that funny that people get a Vita just for Persona 4 stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, I think people would totally be willing to shell out the money for it, especially those super fans.
Yeah, they should have had like a Persona 4 character DLC just be in Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Just have like Nanako, the little girl from Persona 4, and then have her, and then just have her Fire Emblem Mirage stand persona be like one of the little kid. Are there any little kid characters? And I know there's some in Awakening, but are
some. The ages range. You do get some young characters. I think the youngest you get are like teens. I think the lords might be like young, like not yet 18, but they like act like they're young adults, like 20s. But they might be 15. Who knows? Like, they're anime characters too, so like God knows what their age is. But
because there's already a young girl that is a character in the game.
Yeah,
that's going to be a part of your squad. But it's like, it'd be funny if they just went like, yeah, no, we're all out. Here's Nanako. She sings the Juness song. As that's her special attack. That instantly lets you win the game. Like, that would be... that'd be a treat.
No, if she's the OP person, you don't want to use her because that means late game she's not going to be very good, and you want to give the XP to your weaker units.
That's very true.
Yeah, I know. Like, that's the sort of rule of thumb with Fire Emblem, is that if you get, like, a really strong unit, while you're playing the game, then it's kind of like,
You don't want them
oh,
killing all of your.
yeah, you're kind of like, oh, this is a trap. Don't use this person. But if you get like the really weak unit that looks like they're not going to be able to do anything, like it kind of low key. It's sort of like, well, you know what? Maybe if I like put some XP, they're going to turn out to be like a total monster and destroy everything. And like, 9 out of 10 times, that's right.
I will say though, unlike Fire Emblem, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is similar to Persona, so you have like at least 2 other characters along with you, so those 2 will also get XP.
Mm-hmm.
So at least then with your strong character, there is also sort of a shared XP element where some of your party members that aren't with your crew will get like some XP, but not as much as they're in the party.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like there are plenty of RPG games that do that. Even like Shin Megami Tensei 4 did that. But would you? So I feel like I'm kind of running out of stuff at this point. Is there anything else you want to mention about Fire Emblem before we kind of close this off?
I guess just sort of as far as the characters go, a nice thing about, a lot of these Fire Emblem games is they give, obviously each unit has certain attributes that they excel in. There are units that have better defense, units that are very quick, units that are magical, that have good magic resistance, and even within those units, like your archers in Fire Emblem 7, you get an archer that's very strong and has high defense. So he does a lot of damage, and doesn't take a lot of retaliation damage. And then there's also an archer she's very fast, so she'll attack twice in a turn very often, and she has a higher chance of crit, but her strength isn't as high and her defense isn't as high. And so you get the option to choose, like, what type of unit, if you want to use an archer, like if you only want to use one, what do you want? Do you want the one that will hopefully kill the unit and not take any damage, or the one that can maybe take a couple of hits and do, like, if they only attack once, they do a lot of damage in that one attack? And so even with the different variety of units you can play as, each unit, like when you have multiple types of the same unit, you can choose what style within that do you want, and that's a really fun element for me.
Well, great. Well, this is the end of the show. Do you have any kind of things about yourself you want to promote, or anything you think off the top of your head?
I mean, I'm on Jazzy Fresh on Twitter. I think it's Jazzy S Fresh on Twitter. I gotta double check that. I just started up a Tumblr. It's mostly comics, video games, and some knitting, but I don't. That's not anything too special. Let me just pull that up real quick. I do some comic book reviews if you're interested. Just sort of things I'm getting of the week. Let me go to my profile.
Is there any kind of comic book out there right now that you would say kind of reminds you of Fire Emblem?
Ooh. No, I'm not really reading too much fantasy ones, to be honest. So there's not really been anything super Fire Emblem related, actually. I'm usually reading more of the cape stuff, so the superheroes, or something that's a little more modern, like The Fix, or Wicked and Divine.
Yeah.
But on Tumblr, I'm Jazzy Fresh, JAZZYFREASH. So if you want to follow me there, I think I have my Twitter link there as well. It's not a whole lot of content, but just sort of some fun stuff. A lot of it's original content, though, so I do have that going for me, I guess.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, as for me, as always, find me on Twitter on Hendrik Strog, and with that, just remember, every day's great at your Juness. Okay, that had to throw that out there. All right, time for the theme song. Well, ending song.
Bye, guys.